Thanks, everybody. It's lovely to see you all here tonight for our Rights Talk in celebrating our 30th anniversary. My name's Robin Quiggin. I'm the Deputy Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner here at the Australian Human Rights Commission. And I'd like to, as we do, by inviting Aunty Norma to welcome us to country here on the land of the Gadigal. Thank you.
Wajari Gumura, that's the local Aboriginal language, the Gadigal. That's a greeting, a hello, a welcome. And in my language, I'm from Cowra, just over the Blue Mountains, Wiradjuri. So Yirradumarangi and Norma Ingram, Gale Wiradjuri, on the Lachlan River. So I'm freshwater. That's my mother's traditional land, and I can trace my family history from there through my grandmother right back. But this evening, we have the wonderful responsibility of welcoming you to Aboriginal land of the Gadigal people. Where we are tonight, the Gadigal is one of 29 smaller clan groups of the Eora Nation. The Eora Nation is bounded by the Hawkesbury River to the north, the Nepean River to the west, and the Georges River to the south. And within that was, prior to those tall ships, absolute paradise. Some people may think it's still paradise, but you can imagine before all of the buildings. And so the Gadigal were here. They are saltwater people, sunrise. The sunrise comes up and hits this land first, and it will continue to do that long after we are gone. And our great-great-grandchildren are gone. I guarantee you that. And their totem is the Gurrawal, or the big whale that comes down. So these are very important to us, to let you know who we are. And I speak a little bit of my language because it was against the law for us to speak the language while ever we were on the Aboriginal Reserve under the Aboriginal Welfare Act. That's not so long ago. I am not that old. I come a little bit, not that old. And so when you look at it, when you're talking about human rights, where all of this was taken away from us, our language, our culture, and our old people said, we're not going to teach you that now, although they did. It was on the reserves. Because if we do that, they will take our children away from us. So thousands of our children were taken away from their parents, from their families, from their communities, from their culture. Many grew up not knowing that. And it's interesting, I saw next year's NAIDOC theme is about languages. And so we are trying to bring those languages back. And I must say we've got Lynn here, and her sister Auntie Di is one of our wonderful, wonderful teachers of language. She's just absolutely fantastic. So I just want to acknowledge Auntie Di and Lynn, of course. But I want to acknowledge all of the Aboriginal people, our cultures right across this country, our languages, all of our different languages, and that it is being revived and revitalised, and the young ones are being taught it in the school. So we think that's fabulous. And we think that's a big step forward to rectifying some of those wrongs that was done to our people in the past. There are three values that we talk about: respect, respecting the culture, respecting Mother Earth, the land, respecting us, respecting that we have been here on this land since the dream time. I don't care if people say 60,000 years, that's not important to me. We've been here since the dream time. So once you've got that, you've got responsibility. If I've welcomed you to my country, to this land, then you now have a responsibility. If you invite me into your home, I'd have a responsibility to make sure that I take care of that as well. And the last one is reciprocity. And that's just about us taking care of ourselves, each other, making sure you're all right, making sure that I'm okay. And I reckon, it's really Aussie, I reckon that if we all did that, in this country, we don't have any control over any other country, but in this country, if we can follow at least those 3 values, I think that we'll go a long way in us moving forward in the respect of reconciliation to really continue to make this country the great country that it is. So I want to acknowledge the Gadigal people, that they were here, they looked after this land, they looked after the waterways, fresh water, salt water. We've got a tank stream, sorry darling, that comes, I'm doing your job for you. There's a freshwater tank stream that comes under the city here, and it was polluted in the first 20 years of the English coming in with the tall ships and setting up the colony here. And the Gadigal were here to welcome them. We continue to welcome them, but as I said, you have a responsibility once we've done that. So we all as Australians can celebrate together that we are part, and we're on a land that is the longest continuous practice culture, it's the Aboriginal culture, in the entire planet. So if Aussies are not proud of that, I don't know what you're going to be proud of other than your football, sorry. But that's certainly something to be proud of. I want to acknowledge elders, certainly Aboriginal elders and elders of other cultures who place our elders in a position that's rightfully so, as our teachers, our mentors, and making sure that people are doing the right thing. But the other thing as elders, we have to teach our next generation and we have to teach others. You never know, in our next generation, we could have a Prime Minister, well, an Aboriginal Prime Minister. That's something we can work towards once we start getting our people in. But I just want to acknowledge all Aboriginal people who are here and Torres Strait Islander people who are here with us this evening and have come away and left their families at home. I certainly want to acknowledge Mick for all of the work that he's done over the years, and his brother Patrick, who is now Senator Patrick Dodson, which is fantastic. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to Aboriginal land, Gadigal land. Enjoy your evening, and remember, you lift up this tar and cement, it's Aboriginal land. It will always be Aboriginal land. I wish you well. I wish our spiritual ancestors walk with you on your journey home, that you have a safe journey home, and wish you well and wish you good health for you and your family. Welcome to Gadigal land and enjoy your evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Aunty Norma, for your wonderful welcome to country. And as a fellow Wiradjuri woman who's a guest in this Gadigal country, I often think about the fact that, you know, as Aunty Norma said, you know, under the concrete, under the steel girders, and, you know, we can be on the 3rd floor or the 50th floor. It remains Aboriginal land, and the ancestors and the traditional owners of this country still care for it, no matter what's placed on top of it. It's a really important thing to think about, and a really important to reflect on, and a really important way to open an occasion like this. I want to also acknowledge the President of the Australian Human Rights Commission, Professor Gillian Triggs, our Disability Discrimination Commissioner, Alistair McEwen, and our Human Rights Commissioner, Ed Santo, here today. I want to also acknowledge and thank you all for coming to visit, and as Aunty Norma did, I want to acknowledge also our Executive Director, Padma Raman, who's cursing me for doing that. I want to acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. We are a small but extremely powerful and wonderful community, and I want to acknowledge also aunties from Wiradjuri, aunties from Western New South Wales, and our elders and the carriers of culture in this place, the carriers of culture for Wiradjuri people, and people who share that culture too. So today we meet to celebrate, part of the celebration of the 30th anniversary of the Commission, and we're really lucky to have a special event just before we get started on the Rights Talk. We have a terrific guest over from WA who's launching a book that she has been the extremely hardworking. I don't know if any of you have edited a book. It's like wrangling or herding cats, wrangling. I don't know, however you want to describe it. It's a big job to bring about a book like this, to get authors to contribute. It's a really important book. Aboriginal community development. We have such a history of policy and programs and laws top down, imposed on us, and this is about ground up work, and it brings together eminent experts in the field, Aboriginal experts in the field, and I'm going to invite Cheryl to say a few words about it. I just want to introduce Cheryl to you. Professor Cheryl Kickett-Tucker, and I'll only call her Professor once, otherwise she'll come and growl me when she gets here. So Cheryl is, let me just find, sorry. Cheryl is Whadjuk Noongar Budja with family connections to Balladong and Nuit people of Western Australia. She is an eminent academic and also a community worker herself. She runs a really important program in Perth. It's a basketball program for Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal kids, linking basketball to wellbeing. So really important community work. So I want to just ask Cheryl to say a few words about the book, and then Professor Dodson will officially launch it. Thank you. Thanks, Cheryl.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for having me here today. Kaya yan wanju nyan ko Cheryl Kickett-Tucker, Kija yan kwabadak nunga yok. Kaya court bujara yay yakin nija gajul or yora bujara. Nyan karich jian kora kora yay, Kija mil mo non yuko, nalak nin yay murach kajin ora buja. What I've said there is, hello, my name is Cheryl Kickett-Tucker and I'm a very proud Noongar woman. Country is an integral part of being Aboriginal, and today we find ourselves standing in Barani on Gadigal country, which is part of the Eora Nation. In respect and on behalf of the past, present and future elders, I acknowledge their power, passion and good spirit that allow us to be here today on Gadigal country. Thank you very much. Now the book, yes. 3 years of hard work. It's a Noongar term meaning, Maya Maya means home, and without community development, with community development, home is an integral part of everything that we do. It's part of the bloodline, it's part of our songline, it's part of our past, our history and our future. This was a very difficult book to bring together. It really kind of started with Professor Jim Ife, who is the community development grandfather throughout Australia. He's written 6 different versions of community development with Cambridge University Press. And I met him at a function and we got talking, and now the book has born. So it's an Aboriginal community development textbook for scholars, practitioners, and anybody that wants to read it. It's made up of 14 chapters with 29 authors right across Australia, representing 30 Aboriginal nations. So it's a big deal. We look at theory, practices and procedures of community development in a diverse group of people. We focus on the young people, the elders, social justice, healing, history, and it came to fruition with the help of my fellow editors, Professor Dawn Besser from UWA, University of WA, Professor Julie Coffin from Notre Dame University, and Dr. Michael Wright from Curtin University. And the 3 of us with Jim Ife got together and put this book together. The people who have authored this book are not just academics. So there are academics and there are scholars and there are practitioners, but there's a few community people in there and elders in there, because in our world we wear so many different hats. And so in that book itself, the authors may be an academic, may be a scholar, but is also a mum, a dad, a brother or a sister or an aunt. And so all of those different roles that Aboriginal people play are in this book. It is a textbook, so I'm hoping that universities will pick it up. And it does have quite a few review exercises in it and case studies. And so far it's been quite popular. It was launched at the Luitja conference last week in Melbourne. Today, thank you, Robin, for that. And also it's going to be launched at the Centre for Aboriginal Studies at Curtin University on the 8th of December. So we're quite proud of the book, and on your seats you will see a flyer. It's a 20% discount, so we don't have any books here for sale, unfortunately, but please put your book orders in and leave them on the table beside the door there, and I'll pick them up, and I'll see if I can get another 5% discount for everybody. Can't promise it, but I'll see what we can do. But put your book orders in. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got any response to the book, if anybody wants to write us a piece on what they think about the book, please send your pieces to me. I'll leave my cards by the door, because we need to know how it is going out there. And when we do the next versions, are we on track? And if we're not, how do we best get back on track? We can't capture everybody in the book. And you've just got to realise that the diversity and the people who do contribute to the book are like threads of a tapestry. So the threads make the story strong, but there are going to be holes. We don't have all the answers. And walking alongside us in developing this book, we're non-Aboriginal scholars, and there were a few of them that helped us put this book together. So we're quite dedicated to the collaboration of works between our people and non-Aboriginal people, and it's really important, and it does show through this book. So I think I'll leave it there, and thank you very much. And please book your book orders in. I'll have to come hound you.
So we wanted to actually officially launch the book, and Professor Mick Dodson's going to do that. I know that he needs very little introduction for all of you, but I will say that Professor Dodson was first Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner here at the Australian Human Rights Commission. He has been a leading Aboriginal person in relation to so many important foundational pieces of work that have gone on. The Bringing Them Home report, the National Inquiry into the Separation of Aboriginal Children, the Royal Commission into Aboriginal and Torres Islander deaths in custody. He currently chairs the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Institute, Australian Institute of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Studies, I should say, and I was lucky enough to sit on council with him as the chair. He's also been working recently on a big project looking at the contribution of Aboriginal veterans called Serving Our Country. I was lucky enough to, in the last job I had, to be CEO of the Australian Indigenous Governance Institute, of which Professor Dodson is also the deputy chair, and that is a really community development focused work. That governance is at the heart often of community development work, and I'll just ask Professor Dodson to come and say a few words to officially launch the book. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you, Auntie Norma. It's a delight to be on your ancestral lands, and my lian feels good. I'm deeply honoured to be here today to launch this book, my Aboriginal Community Development. In the preamble to the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the General Assembly of the United Nations has endorsed the approaches adopted in this book. When it says it's convinced that control by Indigenous people over developments affecting them and their lands, territories and resources will enable them to maintain and strengthen their institutions, cultures and traditions, and to promote their developments in accordance with their aspirations and needs. Furthermore, in Article 7 of the Declaration, in Sub-Article 2, it says Indigenous peoples have the collective right to live in freedom, peace and security as distinct peoples. Additionally, in Article 23, which says Indigenous peoples have the right to determine and develop priorities and strategies for exercising their rights to development. In particular, Indigenous peoples have the right to be actively involved in developing and determining health, housing and other economic and social programs affecting them, and, as far as possible, to administer such programs through their institutions. Now, I happen to believe that people with problems are probably the best ones to solve those problems. to come up with solutions to those problems. And our task and the task of government is to assist them to achieve that. I want to congratulate the co-editors, led by the chief editor, Professor Cheryl Kickett, and the rest of the editorial team, which includes Professor Dawn Bessarab from the University of Western Australia, Dr. Michael Wright from Curtin University, and Professor Julie Coffin of Notre Dame. There are, of course, 29 authors. You can't write a book without authors, apparently. I can't possibly name them all here tonight, but I'll cite some stats which I've taken from the book. As I said, there are 29 authors from 30 Aboriginal nations across 5 states, including Western Australia, Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia and Victoria. Among those authors, there are 19 females and 10 males, and they age between 32 and 82 years. I think I'm still in the middle there somewhere. And contributors, as Cheryl has said, not only include academics from 10 universities, but also community members, elders, and community development practitioners. Now, this book, what do you say about it? Well, the issues that are confronting our peoples are multi-layered. And this book, as is appropriate, takes a multidisciplinary approach to the issues of Aboriginal community development, Aboriginal history, cultural security, and community studies. The book promotes cultural security in order to empower Aboriginal people to strengthen their own communities. And as well, it's as well as having a comprehensive analysis of community development in Aboriginal communities. So this book, Maya, presents practical strategies and tools for improvement. So, folks, get your plastic out, fill out your forms, leave them over there, 20% off, perhaps with a chance of another 5%. So dust that plastic off and get to work and buy the book. If you're serious about community development in the Indigenous context, you need to read this book. It is officially launched. Thank you.
Thank you, Mick. There are a couple of housekeeping things that I need to tell you. We're being live streamed at the moment, so when it comes to, you'll be invited to ask questions at the conclusion of the speakers in a little while. So just bear that in mind. And also, we're also going out on Facebook and Twitter. So if you want to post, if you want to photograph, if you want to tweet, if you want to, you're welcome to do that, and please do that. So, as I said, you know, we're celebrating this year the 30th anniversary of the Australian Human Rights Commission. 2 weeks ago, we had an event where we looked back over the 30 years of the work of the Commission. This is tonight we're really looking forward and thinking about, as Mick said, the many complex issues. There's enormous work ahead of us. We've made gains in relation to issues like our economic, our participation in the economy. We've made some gains in employment, but we still have a long way to go in relation to incarceration rates, in relation to violence in communities, in relation to, we still have a whole lot of work to find a way to recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in our founding documents. There is much work to be done, and as Mick said, much complex work to be done. And I just want to say that, you know, in the thinking about the work of the Commission, human rights gives a fabulous framework for thinking about all of these issues. For the weaving together of often complex and difficult issues, a human rights framework gives a really clear way of thinking about these things. And I just reflect also on the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. The work that the Commission has done together with Congress was to do declaration dialogues, to take the declaration out into the community, out into to NGOs, out into to government. And we brought, to do that, rather than taking the 46 articles out, although that is important that we deal with the primary documents, we brought it down to 4 key principles. The principle of self-determination, which Mick's already referred to, and I think is absolutely foundational to the community development work that is the subject of the book we've just talked about. The principle of free, prior and informed consent. So that is a really important principle. So often Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people are asked after the event, asked in a way that doesn't hold meaning. And so the principle of free, prior and informed consent is enormously important. The right to protect and respect culture is also really important, and so is the other rights of equality and non-discrimination. And of course, you'd know that the Commission has important complaints work, really extensive complaints work that really gives effect to those rights here. I think it's important to think about those 4 principles and the declaration, because it's a very effective checklist of all the programs, of all the laws, of all the ways that we try to draw together the issues that affect social justice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. If you can just run in your own mind through that checklist, I think they're a good way of thinking about all of the kinds of policies and programs and laws that are often brought to bear on the issues. So looking forward, what are the issues going forward? And we've invited Professor Dodson to come and speak about that as our first Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, and in his capacity and so many other the contributions that he's made. So I'll ask him to return to the lectern to speak about the issues going forward. Thank you.
Nanji Gurjan. I'd like to acknowledge and extend my thanks to Professor Gillian Trigg, the President of the Australian Human Rights Commission. Thank you, Gillian, for inviting me to deliver this address and to be at this anniversary event. Professor Trigg's invitation to be here tonight asked me to talk about the challenges regarding Indigenous human rights and the role of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner into the future. The extent of the challenges are far too large for me to cover in the brief time I have at my disposal tonight. So I intend to address the invitation by examining the potential for constitutional reform. But before I come to that, may I say this. There are a number of issues which bear on the health and well-being of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that require examination. The first of those is what I'll bunch them together, but is reconciliation and social justice. And I cluster these together because I think they go together. And they're followed by the right to self-determination, which, in spite of some false claims in the 1970s, in Australia has never been public policy in Indigenous affairs, and that are based on that collective right. I also want to say a few things about the right to equality and its stablemate, the right to non-discrimination. And finally, conclude by pondering how the opportunities for constitutional reform might positively bring to realisation these ambitions. So, to reconciliation and social justice. When we were negotiating with Prime Minister Keating over the then government's response to the High Court's Mabo decision, One of the outcomes agreed upon was to deliver a social justice package to Indigenous Australians. That promise has never been kept. And I think it remains a necessary issue for the conversation we ought to be having regarding the future of reconciliation, and is also inextricably interwoven with the right to self-determination, the right to equality, and the possibilities for constitutional reform, all of which are arguably foundations upon which we together can achieve substantive positive change in this country. Reconciliation, of course, has, as a word, an ordinary everyday meaning, which perhaps invokes interpersonal relationships. But it's also about accommodating different ideas and beliefs. And implicit in this is a preparedness to move or shift our opinions and attitudes, both personally and collectively. At least that's the way I'd like to think about it. But also I see it very much as a process that perhaps continues through generations, because beliefs, ideas and situations change, not just intergenerationally, but also within generations. What is acceptable to us now may not be what our children or grandchildren or great-grandchildren even might consider appropriate or acceptable. Reconciliation, therefore, to me, seems a bit like social change over generations, or what we might call social justice. As I said in my first report to the Australian Parliament as the Social Justice Commissioner, I see social justice as what hits you when you get up in the morning. Do you wake up in a place that's secure and safe? Does it keep you and your family comfortably? Is there food in the house? Can you provide your kids with a decent breakfast and lunch for school? Does that school honour and value who they are, despite their socio-economic circumstances, ethnicity or cultural background? Are you able to adequately provide for them? Is your work rewarding and your workplace free of discrimination? Are you and your family embraced by the community in which you live as equals, enjoying the rights and fundamental freedoms assumed by all? Does your society care for the poor, the sick, the disabled, the elderly, and those seeking refuge? Do the laws of that society apply equally and fairly to all its citizens, including you? Do you feel you have a say in the social and economic development of the country? Do you feel you can engage effectively politically in your country? And are you the primary decision maker in what happens in your life? Herein, therefore, I believe lies the dilemma at the heart of reconciliation. What I've described as social justice is not reality across Australia, because that's not the social justice I wake up to each day so far as it applies to Indigenous Australians. When I look at this from an Aboriginal lens, I too often see something other than social justice and reconciliation. I see inequality, discrimination, unfairness and isolation. I see marginalisation, dispossession and ostracism. I see denial, ignorance and enmity. I see bureaucratic and political blundering and interference with our daily lives. And I feel despair. Despair because I feel powerless to do anything about it. So, folks, why are we struggling so? Well, I think we struggle because we haven't put enough energy into dealing with the unfinished business. We are still a people of two opposite beliefs, ideas, and from very different situations. Any move to accept different beliefs, to share ideas, and understand the situation of others is too often met without grace, compromise, or understanding. We seem content to persist with the status quo, and the elephants in the room are blissfully ignored. For after all, status quo gives us more of the same. Intervention without free, prior and informed consent. Community closures without notice and denial of recognition. And the tired, worn out, oft-repeated and rebadged failed public policies of the past. Now, folks, I don't mean to create the impression that over the past few decades, the relationship between black and white Australia has not improved. It certainly has, but we have some way to go. And I can say that we've managed to raise awareness and lift the level of cultural competency amongst non-Indigenous Australians, which probably makes us better placed than we were 30 years ago. But what really gnaws at me is the apparent lack of any movement on unmet fundamental issues. Issues that will simply not go away whilst we are busying ourselves with other things. And that's the unfinished business. In part, the unfinished business is the myriad of reports, commissions, inquiries and studies we as a nation have conducted over decades. We've had health reports, housing reports, education reports, welfare reports, community violence reports, law reform reports, economic development reports, employment and unemployment reports, social justice commission reports, deaths in custody reports, the taking of children away reports. The list is almost endless. And on top of this, we've had assessments, evaluations, pilots, trials, umpteen different policies and policy approaches. And all of this paper would comfortably fill a couple of modest suburban libraries. And it's on the shelf where most of them have stayed. They've stayed there, unread, unfinished, their recommendations unimplemented, and they're very much unloved. For the most part, this unfinished business was conducted rigorously, thoroughly, professionally, and a timely manner. And many of those reports simply reconfirm what a previous report or inquiry had already concluded. Generally, their recommendations, generally speaking, that is, their recommendations and plans for action were sensible, based on robust evidence, implementable, and likely to succeed. What we have today is policy looking for evidential support. Sadly, too many of these have been cherry-picked or misrepresented for political convenience, like the Little Children Are Sacred report. The rest have been discarded to those shelves in some darkened room, never to see the light again. And much of this unfinished business contains the answers we have recklessly discarded. I say that they must be resurrected, along with the social justice package. Indeed, many of these reports spell out the urgency for such a package. Now, there's another piece of unfinished business that we dare not speak of. Let me spell it out. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples were in relative peaceful occupation and possession of the landmass and islands we now call Australia for between 50 and 60,000 years before 1788. Now, in 1788, the British came and purported to take possession of the place in the name of the British monarchy, without the consent of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And the taking of the land and its resources, which has proceeded for over 200 years, was and is unjust, unlawful, and devastating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. What the British did and what continued under colonial and post-colonial governments was wrong. This wrong and what has flowed from it has never been adequately addressed or redressed. There were no treaties. There was no recognition of Indigenous sovereignty. Of course, we're in different situations back then than we are now. However, the stark reality borne out by the never-ending litany of statistics is that while the situation of the British and those who followed has got stronger, the situation of Indigenous peoples in this land has got weaker and weaker. Of that, there can be no doubt. Our institutions of democracy and power continue to fail in freeing us from this legacy. These institutions both arise from and are underpinned by the brutal dispossession of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples from our lands and waters, because they are an integral part of the Western judicial and liberal tradition. To quote someone more famous than me, the colonial imagination failed to imagine the relationship of equality and coexistence in all its variations. That is the fundamental source of our problem today. It's perhaps this failure of imagination that we ought to be addressing. The unsettled issues of past dispossession and our inability to deal with the old problems in a new world demands we do things differently. However, the one indisputable thread running through the many tragedies of our shared history is that we simply fail to learn from our past. Or maybe we don't want to learn from our past. As Fitzmaurice obliquely observes, the justice of dispossession of Indigenous peoples from their lands has become one of the most important political questions in the post-colonial world. Now, reconciliation cannot be pursued without asking the key historical question of whether and how colonisation was justified. And if we crave reconciliation and social justice, we collectively have to come up with an answer to that question. While you ponder that, I'll turn to self-determination. Now, when I speak about self-determination, I'm not talking about its customary, ordinary, international legal meaning and its political application. Self-determination, to me, is very closely, in a domestic sense, aligned to social justice. Social justice gives you that new day of well-being when you wake up. Self-determination puts you and your community in charge of the decisions being made about you and them that day and every day. And self-determination demands you take responsibility. It makes you accountable, and it allows you, importantly, to make mistakes. It gives you autonomy and control of your destiny as peoples. You take charge of your culture, your language, and your development. It allows you as peoples to determine your status and puts you in charge of your social and economic future. It's not the self-administration of someone else's agenda. It's your agenda, your responsibilities. And it's this policy approach, I firmly believe, that provides the answers. And the concept's not too difficult to comprehend. Self-determination involves allowing those who are most affected in their daily lives by the decisions, to make those decisions and then take responsibility. And learn from the lessons of implementing those decisions. Many Indigenous groups, communities, and community-owned corporations have already set themselves on the path to self-determination through the way they get their business done. They're taking charge, they are deciding, they're not waiting for this to happen, and nor are they waiting for government to arrive. Turning to equality, it's also not a difficult idea to grasp, but it's often misunderstood with sameness. Sameness may be about being equal, but it's not equality. We don't treat unequal equally because that wouldn't be fair. If people's circumstances are different, we try to account for that. Hence, we have notions of formal and substantive equality. And the right to equality demands that. That's why our law and international law not only allows, but demands special measures applied to achieve equality. Because sometimes it may be necessary to treat people differently in order to achieve equality. Now, I don't think it's a thing for dispute, but in Australia, the Indigenous population has the worst outcomes on the equality scale of any other group in the country. Now, pick any socio-economic indicator, and we generally had the list for the poorest outcomes. You name it. Unemployment, heart disease, diabetes, high school completions, infant mortality, literacy, numeracy, liver disease, income levels. And some of our folks still even contract leprosy and TB. Now, that these poor statistics have been stubbornly with us for so long is a national disgrace. And our inability to shift the burden is testament to our tolerance for inequality. Equality affirms that all humans are born free and equal. Equality presupposes that all individuals have the same rights and deserve the same level of respect. And all people have a right to be treated equally. This means the laws, and our constitution's a law, folks, should not be discriminatory. And in this sense, this is where non-discrimination, as I said earlier, is the stablemate of the right to equality. It ensures that nobody is denied their rights because of factors such as race, colour, sex and sexual orientation, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property or birth. Now, most of you would know that Australia is a treaty party to 7 of the core international human rights treaties. And the right to equality and non-discrimination are contained in every single one of them. And Australia's pledged it will uphold them. We've given a promise to the rest of the world, a treaty promise that we will uphold them. And we've signed an obligation to do so. So our constitution should also affirm all Australians are born free and equal. We should be able to assume that all citizens are given under our singular founding document the same rights and deserve the same level of respect. All Australians have a right to equality, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. The Australian Constitution presently does not do that. The Australian Constitution, in fact, still permits discrimination against members of any race. It allows Parliament to pass laws that can discriminate on the basis of race, and the Parliament has passed such laws, and in each case, exclusively against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians. So let me turn to the idea of constitutional reform and its possibilities. As I said, the Australian Constitution as it presently stands does not guarantee equality for all. Certainly not for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. And in fact is totally silent on the question of equality, as it is on the right to non-discrimination, save a few exceptions. Now, our Constitution is a cumbersome beast, and it's particularly difficult to change, almost impossible to change. And it may be a little impossible to believe, but Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are still not full citizens under its present terms. The Constitution presently makes it lawful to treat some of our citizens differently, but not in the sense I spoke about above, about substantive equality. Not in that sense. Not in the sense where it may be necessary sometimes to treat people differently to achieve equality. No, that's not what our Constitution means. Defending parts of our Constitution are Section 25 and subsection 26 of Section 51. Firstly, to Section 5, it currently contemplates the possibility of disqualifying people of a particular race from voting in state elections. And Section 51 currently allows the government to make special laws for people of any race. Now, I think it's absurd in a modern democratic country that we have a Section 25 in our Constitution. And I think there's overwhelming support that it should go, so I don't want to spend any more time on it. Subsection 26 of Section 51 and Section 127, the section that permits the census, well, up until 1967, were the only provisions where any reference appeared regarding Aborigines. Torres Strait Islanders have not and never have been and never were mentioned in our Constitution. So I haven't got time tonight to go into the question of race. That deserves its own lecture. Safe to say this, the notion of race, as outlined in our Constitution, is outmoded and in biological and scientific terms, meaningless and defunct. As one commentator has said, it is man's most dangerous myth, and it's thoroughly and dangerously unsound. It was said the origins of subsection 26 arose in the original draft of the Constitutional Bill of 1891, which purported to empower the Commonwealth Parliament to make laws for the affairs of the people of any race with respect to whom it is deemed necessary to make special laws not applicable to the general community. And it seems clear when you examine the constitutional history that this section of the Australian Constitution was never meant for Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders. It was meant to apply to aliens. We were simply not on the radar at the Constitutional Conventions in the 1890s. We were invisible, and our attempts to fix the shortcomings in 1967 simply exacerbated the problems because subsection 26 was never meant for us. In the end result, we were captured and are captured by its discriminatory aspects. So the goodwill that sought to include us in 1967 was misplaced, and now the Commonwealth has the power to make laws for us on the basis of race. As a consequence, we are further excluded and marginalised, not only by the Parliament, but by the court. This power was always intended to give the Commonwealth the authority to do what the governments of the colonies have been doing all along until 1900. Namely, to discriminate against anyone coming to the colonies who was not British. Ironically, at the time of the Constitution coming into force, Aborigines were considered British subjects of the Federation. Now, I better finish up, I think. I'm a bit fuller than I thought. Let me conclude. I think pending the establishment of an inclusive Australian Republic, we should bring our Constitution back to life. It has to become a living document for us. It's currently not. At its foundation, the Australian Constitution, as it stands, is an exclusionary document for Australia's Indigenous people. The referendum of 1967 demonstrated that there is a deep desire for a sense of inclusion in Australian society that many Indigenous people still hold high as the pinnacle of reconciliation in Australia. But unfortunately, it hasn't delivered equality to First Nations. The changes to the Constitution allowed the Commonwealth Government to pass laws that could be used specifically for Indigenous peoples, but there was and is no guarantee that such laws will be beneficial. The freedom from discrimination of all people, the freedom of all people from non-discrimination is an inviolable right and cannot be subject to the whim or avarice of government, any government of the day. And I think these express rights will enable Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to build self-determination in a real and very practical sense in our communities. And these express rights for all Australians will go some way to meeting our international obligations and create an inclusive society that we can feel a part of and be proud of. It will, I think, begin to address those elephants in the room and deal with the unfinished business. It is the stuff of true reconciliation. Galia, I'm finished.
Thank you, Professor Dodson. We have two further speakers. Cheryl, again, would like to say a few words, and also Jeff Scott. So we've also just, we've turned the air conditioning up a bit, so hopefully for those of you feeling the heat, it should get a bit more comfortable. So I'll invite Cheryl to come and say a few words as well. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a feeling I might have to tell you all to jump up for a minute. People are looking a bit weary. I think we should do that. Come on, up we get. Yeah, shake it off, everyone. Come on. Sorry, it's my old sports science coming out of me. I can't help it. If there was an oval out there, we'd be doing laps. There you go. Yeah, okay. Take a seat. Thank you very much. I'd just like to say thank you very much to Gillian Trigg for the opportunity to be here, Deputy Commissioner Robin Quiggin, who I know via email mostly. Today I finally met her, Professor Mick Dodson, Mr Jeff Scott, also Beverly Stock from the Human Rights Commission. And I'd also like to acknowledge two authors that are here today from the book. Professor Janet Mooney, standing right in this, she's right, wave Janet, and Dr Lynette Riley, up you get. Chapter 4, Dimensions of Aboriginal Community Development. If you want to know, go see those lovely ladies. I also like to say to everyone here today, the little one running around is mine. I claim her. That's Karis. And I'm very grateful that my husband, Quinton, is here today. People that know me, I'm not much of a traveller, and the tribe has to come with me, unfortunately. So thank you very much. Okay, let me just get to my piece. Oh, geez. Sorry, I've just lost my spot. Okay, so this evening I just want to quickly talk about children and young people in the face of social justice, and I'm going to hone in on the right to Aboriginal identity, and I'm going to say Aboriginal because in Western Australia we use that word. We do not use the word Indigenous, we use the word Aboriginal, and its importance to well-being. You know, we have our elders and our land and our ancestors to guide us. We have our families to hold us, keep us strong. We have the love for our children to remind us of our responsibility to keep them strong in culture. This is a quote from the National Secretariat of Aboriginal and Islander Childcare, and in it talks about culture. But why is culture important in terms of the rights of a child and their identity? Because it is intimately connected to identity, and this identity is connected to our well-being as a group of people and as individuals. And how is this so? Well, there's lots of research around to show the connection between identity, culture and well-being. And according to the young people that I currently work with, I am an academic, but I also run community programs as well. And it's really important that the research gives back to the community. The work that I do, I'm going to present a little piece of that today. So identity is comprised of a myriad of things for young people, and I'm going to tell you what they said to us. We really listen to our kids and our young people, and we're not that young in the room here today. So some of the things they talked about was identity is important and is a huge part of connection to family and kin. It's also comprised of culture, language, inheritance. And inheritance, I don't mean the money or the boya, as we say. I'm talking about the customs and the stories that are filtered to our families. Also friends, and also humour. Part of being Aboriginal today. We use a lot of humour to get through the grind and definitely the daily challenges. It's definitely a huge part of our kids' identity, and it comes out very strongly, particularly when kids are traumatised and things are going on at home and they come to us in some of our community development programs, and you can always have a joke with them, and you can always do a bear hug or tickle them or something like that. I know that the teachers in my program say, you're not allowed to touch these kids, but we're all one people, particularly in Perth, we're all related. That I had to go to the desert to marry my husband. I'm from the city, so in the hills. So, attached to all those things of identity are things like the skill to be Aboriginal, the knowledges of being Aboriginal, the attributes of being Aboriginal, the emotion, judgments, the expectations. And these combine tell the child and the youth how to belong, what to think, and how to act. About out in the media, where a lot of the stories about our people are that we're damaged and broken, that there's lots of things wrong with us. The kids see this and they feed that into their identity, their knowledge of identity, unless we step up and show them that that's not our way. Our rites of passage is not about stealing a car and getting pregnant and having a big mob of kids by the time you're 20. Our way is way different. And when the kids behave what they see, they become a self-fulfilling prophecy if Aboriginal people don't stand up and say that is not the way to be. It's so much more, So today, you do see the full effects of kids getting, battered with all this information about how to be, and it's not the right information, and it's not from our people. We don't control the media. We don't control the information that's given out there, but we can control what we say as a family and as a community. And we are pretty strong people. We're still here. There are pockets of our people who are surviving, and there's a lot more people who are thriving, yet we never hear about them. We never hear about them. And our kids are a good example of that. With the limited and or maybe negative concepts of identity, it's played out with these young kids, a lot of these kids anyhow, and I don't want to go through all the data, and the incarceration rates are quite high, the teenage pregnancies, unemployment, and the big one, suicide. But there is hope and there is inspiration in our identity as Aboriginal people, because a strong Aboriginal identity will produce strong self-esteem and how you evaluate and love yourself. And this will in tune impact your well-being. And this has been proven by research over and over again. And unfortunately for us Aboriginal people in Australia, it's not until we step outside our country that people start taking notice of us. And as an academic, I know that's so true. For example, in Native Canadian and Sami communities, Sami are the people in the Laplands across Norway and Sweden, the traditional reindeer herders. In those communities, they have found that culture/identity has impacted positively on young people's self-esteem because it's been shown to be a buffer against youth suicide. And what's happening in the Kimberley in Western Australia? It's all going up. In my own community in Narrogin, a southwest town near Perth, it's all going up. It's becoming like the norm because kids see it and it's posted, their friends post this stuff on all this social media, Snapchat, Twitter, that I can't stand. But they share it like it's a normal behaviour, and that's what's expected of them from us as Aboriginal people and as a community. That's not our way. But, you know, also in his communities, the rights to self-determination, to make choices, to make mistakes, to be in control, to lead, has had positive and sustainable impact on the development of the community as a whole. And instead of surviving, Janet, you'll like this word, thriving. So what does this mean for us? What are the learnings from this bit of research that's done overseas? Well, first of all, the way that we look at our people needs to be changed. The lens in which we view our children and young people, instead of downtrodden, broken and need fixing and are completely traumatised and not resilient. Helen Milroy, who's an Aboriginal child psychiatrist, said children are our greatest assets. Why is that so? Because we've got so damn many of them. You know, I'm from a family of 8. I'm in the middle. My husband's from a family of 7. We've only got 3 kids. 1 in every decade, though. But I'm serious, 21, 16 and 6. It's hard. But they're our greatest assets. You know, I'm lucky my parents are still around, and they provide that you know, the guts of keep going when you think all is lost, because nothing is lost. Everything we've done, the steps we've moved forward and the journey ahead is only going to be brighter. And this is what I teach the kids, to ignore the media, to ignore what's been on social media. But inside your heart, in your court is your heart, it's mudich, which means solid. And that's what you need to listen to, and we'll help you with everything else. You know, according to the 2011 census, not the one that was buggered up, there's 36% of our Aboriginal population in Australia are 15 years or younger. There you go, greatest assets right there. We as an Aboriginal nation and the Australian nation have an untapped reservoir of assets whom are seriously sociable. They display genuine care towards other people and places. They're very open-minded. They are risk takers. They display genuine interest in a range of topics. Like, you ask them anything, know everything. They're no sponges anymore. They care about their family and kin. They display a hunger for knowledge of culture, and they want to demonstrate their integrity and their honesty about being Aboriginal. And that's important, because in order to do good in the community, you have to feel good about yourself. However, but the thing is, what gets in the way of these children and young people and their road to wellbeing is the lens in which the rest of us, particularly the media, government and Joe Blogs next door use. And the lens that they use is unifocal, and it's got blinkers, you know, that horse racers have. So what that creates is a vision that is short-sighted. It's a tunnel vision with limited capacity to see the whole picture where our kids are. You know, and they're labelled them broken and need fixing. And it's not necessarily the case. So today, the message that I want to give you is the message of hope and inspiration. As you walk out these doors today, I encourage you to throw away your glasses and get another set. And this set has to be a strength-based lens that projects a holistic picture of interrelatedness, of love, humour, friendship and humanity. An example of that lens is being played out in a basketball wellbeing program that Robin talked about called Cart, Court and Hoops. Cart is your head, court is your heart and hoops. It's a program for 4 to 13-year-olds. It's an urban program for urban Aboriginal children, and in the urban centre in Perth, we are never seen. We don't exist unless we're past the black stump. So what us urban people have to do is focus in and allow people to see us more. And our wellbeing program is in the city of Swan. It's an excellent example of a strength-based lens that promotes reconciliation and humanity among Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal children and young people. The pillars of our program are on friendships, fun, fitness, and definitely food. It's our way, the blackfellow way, to feed everybody. We have kids from 15 nations attending our program. We had a quota of reaching 60 kids in 12 months. We have 140 in less than 6 months. And it just shows you, when you put the control, the determination and the steering wheel back into the hands of our kids, the programs we run will stay and they'll stick. Plus, they also talk a lot amongst their friends and say, that's a pretty good program, let's all go. So it is a preventative approach using a community development framework. And so we have non-Aboriginal and Aboriginal parents for the first time in a very low socioeconomic and depressed area, a very poor area where poverty is colourblind, that our Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal community are coming together to cut oranges, to put water in the water bottles, to put the uniforms out, to mingle with our kids, to coach the children, to manage, to umpire, a whole range of things. And walking alongside those adults are what we call peer ambassadors. Originally, I opened the program up to Aboriginal kids only in high school. So these are high school children from the ages of 14 to 17 to be peer ambassadors to actually coach and deliver this program to the younger children who are all cultures. But a lot of non-Aboriginal kids wanted to do it as well. And because of our inclusive nature and because we see everyone as a human being than anything else, we allowed all the other children to come in. Now we have a very good core of peer ambassadors working alongside our community in delivering this program. Yes, basketball is a hook, but it's bigger than that. Wellbeing is quite holistic and we're all related to each other in some way. You know, there's like 1 degree of separation in Perth, I'm sure of it. Yes. You know, and the last thing I need to say to you today, from that basketball program that we run, it takes a community to build and keep a child, and that's what we're doing on the ground. And in response to Professor Dodson's speech today, we are taking control on the ground with our children. We're not waiting for the government to be all and end all and adults to come fix everything. We are looking at ourselves as strong community and we're looking at the expertise of our kids and the non-Aboriginal and Aboriginal adults in our community to come together to build something from the grassroots up rather than top down. And in our community, it's working. Like I said, we've got over 140 kids and we've not even hit a year in the program and it's growing. Every week we're enrolling 5 or 6 different kids. They're supposed to come from the local shire, but now we're enrolling children like 5 shires away from us and it takes them about 40 minutes to get to our program. And I said to them the other day, you sure you want to come to this program? It's so far away from where you live. Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. You know, so that's really good for us. And so the world is our oyster, I say to these kids. Just one other thing, there's a young boy that came into our program, got into trouble quite a lot and was definitely on the wrong tracks. And the way that he would speak to our team of people was he'd be like 200 metres away with his back to us talking. And now he sits right alongside us and bumps us and says, how you going? What's up? You know, he hasn't been into trouble with the law. He was really quite naughty and he's really changed his tune. He still stirs everybody up, like he'll throw basketballs in the middle of a session, you know, when he's not supposed to. But, you know, his heart is changing because we took notice of him. We didn't say he was a boy or a girl or Aboriginal. He was a kid. He was a kid that had trouble at home and he needed to feel loved and felt like he belonged and he was worthwhile. So my team give that to him. And that for us is what social justice reconciliation is all about. We treat all the kids on the basis of humanity and that's where our program's based. I'd like to leave you with this last proverb and then I'll hand it over to Robin again. And again, as you walk out this door with your new glasses and your seeds of inspiration of hope, think of this. We are all visitors here to this time and this place. We're only passing through. And our purpose here is to observe, to learn, to grow, and then we return home. Order. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cheryl. I think, you know, listening to both Mick and Cheryl, this wonderful themes of, you know, truth, really telling the truth about the history here that Professor Dodson talked about, living in that truth of colonisation and the reality of what's happened here, self-determination, a strengths-based approach, the importance of children and young people, of community development, and, you know, I love Cheryl's last point, the importance of inclusiveness. Our last speaker tonight is Jeff Scott. Jeff is a Wiradjuri man from Narromine in New South Wales with more than 30 years of experience working in Aboriginal affairs. He's now the Executive Officer of the Referendum Council. His previous positions include CEO of the National Congress of Australia's First Peoples, CEO of New South Wales Aboriginal Land Council, Director General of the New South Wales Department of Aboriginal Affairs, Deputy CEO of ATSIC. His other achievements include being appointed as adjunct professor at the University of Technology in Sydney and former chairman of the Australian Indigenous Leadership. I have never known somebody who can crunch facts, numbers, and come up with an incisive analysis in the same way that that Jeff can. And it's a great honour to have him here tonight. Thank you.
Robin, thank you. I'd first like to pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and also whose lands we gathered tonight, and thank Norma for her words, and also to acknowledge Joy and Lynn. Wiradjuri people should unite. I would acknowledge Professor Triggs, Alison McEwen, Ed Santa, and Padma, and Cheryl Kickett. Mick Dodson tonight has provided some thoughtful and wise words in what he thinks has happened and what should be done. Well, I've learned a lot from the discussion tonight, actually. We're having discussions around what we think of the Constitution, what should be done, especially in my current position. So it was actually good. But the landscape we're having this conversation is a fairly dark one. You know, many people characterise the environment as sort of living in a constant storm. It's noisy and dark and inhospitable. That's how many Aboriginal and Torres Strait people see the world. But with the step back and have a reality check, if you work in this area and you advocate for the poor, for the marginalised, for the dispossessed, the less fortunate, it's always going to be difficult. It's always going to be inhospitable. You're challenging the comfort zone of the dominant society, and that makes you a problem. But should we expect that pushback? Should we have hope for a more mature and fair-minded environment? Well, in today's society, where our leaders constantly harangue us about who the enemies are, who the problems are, and people live in fear. These days, your unmarried mothers are a problem. The aged are a problem. The disabled are a problem. Refugees are a big problem. And they're the leaners in the parlance of our current leaders. But there are many issues facing Aboriginal and Torres Strait people, and the substantial effort over a sustained period of time, over many decades, that could be termed an indictment on us all. Progress has not been there. And the most vulnerable shoulder the burden, women and children. But I'm not going to go into chapter and verse what happens, and all those who care know those figures. We're going to be reflective and focus on the journey. I'll get back to Professor Dodson's points. But to some extent, the progress has been in the right direction. Granted, there's been some hiccups lately, but the trend is still a positive one, but the elephants remain. Constitutional recognition presents an opportunity to at least establish or restore our voice. It's been largely ignored but not silenced. I think, as Professor Dodson has put it, it presents a potential to renegotiate the relationship and to respond to unfinished business. But changing the Constitution is not an easy one. There's been 150 attempts. Of those 150, only 44 have got past the Parliament. Of those 44, only 8 have got past the people. And they've been pretty dry. Except for the provision about Aboriginal people. The rest have been about payment of debts, retirement over judges, who votes in the constitutional elections. So it's been fairly dry. And I often contemplate sometimes what would have happened if the 67 referendum had not been successful. The first 30 years could be seen as a positive era. We had many positive issues. The various bits of legislation, the Loans Commission, ATSIC, the IBA, the ILC, IATSIS. There's many issues. But the last 10 have not. And that's why Aboriginal people now question the benefits. Up until the early 2000s, it was seen as positive. But then we had a man called Howard. And I call it Howard's Trident, actually. 3 bits of legislation. Hindmarsh Island, Mabo 2, the Wick Amendments, and the Northern Territory Intervention have all been used to negative. And despite the fact that Section 5126 was supposed to be about race, the only time it's ever been used is in respect of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and lately to negative. Again, just why it comes back, that power remains. I think the point at the moment is, can you trust that power with the political environment that exists? So I understand fully what Professor Dodson was putting up. We also have the Racial Discrimination Act, a very powerful and instructive shield, one again which is under attack. We must remain resolute but balanced and alert. But talking about rights and being reflective, let's try and get through this much quicker than I thought I would. We've had lots of international focuses. We've got the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. We have the expert mechanism. We have the Universal Periodic Review, which is now in its second iteration. So there are some positives on the rights area, which is we've got to focus on. But none of those has actually been reflected on the domestic front. Now, against that, we have the Human Rights Commission, the Social Justice Commissioner, to keep a watchful brief on those issues. Most Australians don't know they exist. But there's still many domestic challenges facing us. There's a domestic application of the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. Haven't seen any evidence of it anywhere. There's native title. We're entering the second phase now. People have got some access to land and resources and some title. The question is now, how do you realise that and make a benefit of it? As Professor Dodson also mentioned, the social justice package is unfulfilled. The unfinished third stage of the response to Mabo, still sitting on the bookshelves. Recognition, Rights and Reforms, the document that portrayed it, is as relevant today as it was in '96, when, again, that man Howard put on the shelf. Professor Dodson also mentioned the substantive equality versus formal equality. Formal equality is about treating everyone equally. Either inequality is the objective, but you want to entrench it. Substantive equality is about treating people differently to make equality the outcome. Sadly, many of our advocates today advocate for the former. Professor Dodson then went on to actually put a position between reconciliation and social justice, self-determination, equality, and finally the constitutional recognition. His real observation was that social justice underpins and remains the dominant criteria against which you implement and measure the definition of reconciliation. And it's whether self-determination is a reality, whether equality is the outcome. Again, he applies that criteria to the constitutional amendments. Okay, sure. The last one I'd like to make is development. In this country, if you use the word development, and with your focus on community development, if you talk about development for communities in Australia, they look at you like you're weird. That only happens overseas. And in fact, the Department of Foreign Affairs has adopted the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People in ILO 169, with two provisions that look at development and the right to development to apply to how we treat people overseas, not in this country. That's in their official policy, but in no other department. But going for that, development is empowerment. Empowerment is self-determination. And self-determination is the solution, not the problem. It's about putting people in a position where they can actually make the decisions that affect their lives. That means taking responsibility, the authority, and providing the answers. We must move away from the palliative care programs we have at the moment. And that's what they are, be it income management, be it, again, the closure of communities. It's all about telling people what to do. Most people take it for granted to make decisions in your life. In many Aboriginal communities, those decisions aren't there. It's a very instructive and relevant observation. But again, the challenges are yet to overcome are many, but you've got to look behind you to see the progress. We have got a lot of progress. There's lots of our people are in many positions at the moment, be they doctors, lawyers, in the professions, or up there. Again, there's a lot just to be done. But for Professor Dodson's comments, I think they're very instructive and will serve us well to take into account when we're looking at the constitutional recognition and for the debates we're having today, the unfinished business. Thank you.
We have probably run out of time. I think, I'm not sure we have really time for questions. I'd just like to conclude tonight by just summing up a little and saying that I think, you know, we've had wonderful discussion from our panellists about individual rights, about collective rights, and about what we can expect from our institutions. The importance of the articulation of human rights in international instruments and the importance of bringing them down into domestic implementation. And I want to say to you that the Commission remains absolutely committed to that work, to continuing these conversations and progressing those rights. Thank you for coming tonight. We really enjoy having you here and participating in this celebration of our 30 years, and we look forward to continuing to engage with you for many years to come. So thank you very much. Can we just, in closing, thank our three speakers? Thank you. Thanks very much. That draws us to a close. Thank you.